Hello, this is the video for hip extension, flexion, adduction, abduction, internal rotation, and external rotation. So for hip extension and hip flexion, I like this functional movement that actually incorporates both, but mainly hip extension. It's great for athletes. It's a much more difficult movement. But before we dive into the easier stuff for strengthening, this is a great movement to improve explosiveness and to build strength too. So you start in a seated position. What you're looking to do is you use your arms to come up, extend your hips, and then jump up with your knees and land on your feet. So this is what you want it to look like. You're here and stand on up. So one more time. You're here. Notice how I extend powerfully with my hips to give me momentum to go up into the air. So I'm here, come down, and come up. So that incorporates the hip extensors and the hip flexors too, actually, because when you're here, you're extending your hips powerfully, but then when you bring your knees up to bring it up here, you're flexing your hips to bring your knees up, and then as you stand up again, you're extending your hips. So that's a great functional movement. But when it comes to building strength for those who've been injured, this is what you want to be doing for hip flexion. You want to have a band, preferably a smaller band for hip flexion. I'm here working with resistance. With a band, you want to have it tied around, standing on it, and you're lifting the band up like this with resistance. A shorter band will work better. That's hip flexion to strengthen with resistance. With gravity, it's just like this, up and down, and then gravity eliminated, you're lying on the side, and you're coming up. So that's hip flexion. Hip extension. So for hip extension, you want to have the band around your ankle here, tied to something in front of you. I'm going to come to the side, so in front of you, and then you're just pulling your heel back and forth with the band around you. This is with gravity as well. So with gravity, you just wouldn't have the band and you'd come back and forth. Gravity eliminated, you'd be in a side lying position again, and you'd be pulling back and forth. That's gravity eliminated hip extension. Now, hip abduction, you want to have the band tied to something. So if it's your right foot, you want to have it tied to something to the left side of your body, and you want to be going from here out like that and back out, controlling that back and forth. It's hip abduction. And then hip abduction, that's for resistance, and this is hip abduction with gravity neutral, because you're just moving away. Gravity isn't really pulling. Now, if you want to incorporate gravity into hip abduction, you want to be side lying here and then pulling back up and down here, up. That's hip abduction with gravity. Now, hip adduction or adduction, hip adduction, you would be with gravity. So you're working against gravity here. You'd put your foot that's above your body. So if you're lying on your left side, your right foot would come here, and you'd lift this foot up just like that. Up, that lower foot, come up and down. That's hip adduction with gravity. Now without gravity, you would just have your foot out here, bringing it in toward your body and back. And now if you're working your left hip for adduction, you would have your band tied to the same side, so the resistance would come from the same side, and you would be pulling in, out like that for hip adduction. Now for hip internal rotation and external rotation. So for internal rotation, you want to be here with your toe and moving it in and out. So we don't want to be moving it down, because that's actually ankle eversion and ankle inversion and eversion. We want to keep that foot flat, so as flat to the ground as possible, coming from that side to the inside. We can also use a smaller resistance band to have it around our toe. And if that resistance band is if that resistance band is tied to something to the left side and you have your right foot, you would be working on hip external rotation. So turning your hip outward. Now for internal rotation, you would have the band, the resistance would be on the same side. You would be pulling it in just like that, in and out. Controlling that back and forth. In a gravity eliminated situation, you would just do it without the resistance. And then if you wanted to work against gravity, you would be turning here, turning back, forth. So for gravity, working against gravity, internal rotation, you would be lying on your left side to do your right leg, and then external rotation, you would be, internal rotation against gravity would be the lower leg if you're lying on your left side, so for the left side. And then external rotation, you'd be that right leg going out and in, out and in for external rotation. That's it. Thank you.